Now, the Blue Devils aren't accustomed to going on first here. There's a reason why that happened, Michael.
It's all a result of a new scoring system. It's a way they're choosing the people that go on, essentially, although the jury's still out on it. It's a blind draw. The only thing they know is that they're in the top 12. In the top 5, they know they're in the top 5, but they don't know where.
And neither do we. So what happened? They did the draw. It's created a little bit of controversy. And the question for DCI Executive Director Don Pessione, why did you do it?
Coming into this show, we have 6, 7, or 8 cores under the right conditions that could win. And I think those drum corps know it. And without the preliminary scores, they have no idea of what's going to happen and what they have to do to be the best. And I think it's going to charge the kids up. I hope it charges everybody up.
Oh, it certainly charged people up. That's for damn sure. The year is 1988. It's a hot and sultry night in Kansas City, Missouri at Arrowhead Stadium. Boo, I hate the Chiefs, by the way. Anyway, Kansas City, Missouri, Arrowhead Stadium, 1988, and DCI decides to rev things up, if you will, to bring up a little bit of controversy, and that's what this series is about. And what they did was they did a random draw for performance order at DCI Finals, which ultimately resulted in the Blue Devils performing way early in the evening, Madison Scouts performing way late in the night. And did you all happen to notice the little bit of a finger point when the Madison Scouts drum major was selecting their performance order? That finger point has wound people up since 1988. So what we're going to do in this episode today is we're going to watch all 3 of the top 3 from 1988, and we are going to decide, did the Madison Scouts actually win DCI Finals in 1988, or should it have been somebody else? This is going to be a long one, folks. Make sure you've got some cold drinks and some snacks, because we're going to be here a while here on the Marching Arts Network. Let's go. Welcome back to the Marching Arts Network. My name is Kanan, and first and foremost, I'd like to thank you for joining us today. And I'd like to offer some apologies, as this video is nearly 3 weeks late. I do apologize. I've had a pretty rough couple of weeks. I was down for a week with pneumonia, and then being a little bit self-indulgent here, I'm just going to share a picture. My beloved dog, Bobby, passed away last week. So I've just taken a step back, and I'm now back. I feel ready to tackle this final episode in our controversy series. So as I said, we're going to be looking at 1988. This is going to be a long video, folks, because what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at all 3 of the top 3 cores in their shows in the entirety, and we're going to score them according to the sheets from 1988. And those sheets will look somewhat different to what we're used to when looking at modern sheets, but nonetheless, let's see here. I've got them over here on this screen, and we'll go ahead and see what they look like. So this is what judging sheets looked like back in 1988. We had 6 judges, although I do think we actually had a 7th for color guard. However, color guard wasn't its own caption then. So we had general effect and we had performance. Excuse me. We had general effect, we had performance, and general effect was broken down 20 points for brass, 15 points for percussion, 20 points for visual, for a subtotal of 55. And performance captions were, again, brass, percussion, and visual, with 15, 15, and 15 across the board, of course, giving us our total of 100. Color guard was scored on the sheets. However, their individual scores, whilst used to determine a caption winner, weren't separate to the rest of the captions. So those are the criteria we're going to look at. So how are we going to do this today? So what we're going to do is really quite simple. We're going to watch the show. I'm going to go away after each show, and I'm going to fill out my judge's sheet. And then at the end, we'll look at my results. We'll look at the actual results and see, did the judges get it right? Did they get it wrong? Or am I completely talking out of my ass? So I'm not going to talk a lot in this episode because we do have 3 drum corps shows to go through. But before we do that, what I'd like to do is just ask, if you aren't already subscribed, we'd love it if you could help us out and hit the subscribe button. And if you like what we're doing, hit the like button. And please feel free to leave a comment as well. We also do have a merchandise store if you want to support us. And we do also have a membership scheme. So with that said, I will now shut up and let's watch some drum corps shows, shall we? Right, so the 1988 Blue Devils, a really, really cool show. They debuted a new uniform for 1988. A lot of people called them the Gray Devils that year, which will become strictly evident is when you actually see them. If you've never seen them before, you're in for a bit of a treat. The repertoire that year was Happy Days Are Here Again, That Old Black Magic, Goodbye Yesterday, and Since I Fell for You. The staff that year, some of the big names on staff, if you will, is you had Wayne Downey as the main arranger and caption head for the brass, Tom Float with the percussion, and visual was, of course, who was visual that year, actually? Was it Scott? I think it was. Give me a second here. Looks like it might have been actually Mike Moxley. Anyway, I could be wrong. But yeah, you did have a young Scott Johnson teaching the percussion that year. Yeah, anyway, great show. Things to look out for as well within the line is a young John Meehan on soprano. And I will stop talking and let's just watch the show because that's what we're supposed to be doing. And here we go. Sorry about that. Mario Fabiola there, ex-freelancer. Such a beautiful full brass sound. Classic 80s Blue Devils, but with a laid-back jazz feel to them. Very much a different Blue Devils corps to the one that we know now. The movement that they did back then was much less, it was more about the music than it was about the visual to an extent. I think Blue Devils are now known for doing a lot of visual, but they didn't really do so back then. Look at that. Always loved that brass hit. something easy to forget about this corps as well. By Blue Devil standards, they were coming off of a down year in 1987 where they placed 4th. After, of course, winning in 1986 with probably one of the best drum corps ever in the history of DCI. Now, while the visual was different back then, of course, it was super clean, it was super crisp. They marched really, really well. There you go, John Meehan. Blue Devils moving in a block, still a visual signature to this day. I'm going to just very quickly for the youngsters here that don't know what this is. I'm going to rewind here. That instrument right there. So back in the G bugle stage, we used to do a lot of experimentation with different types of instruments, so long as it was G bugle. So that there is what they called a meophone. The only corps that ever used that instrument was, in fact, the Blue Devils. And it was this weird combination between a French horn, a mellophone, and a flugelhorn. Very long, weird-looking horn, but again, a very unique sound, which again, I think when you go back to the Blue Devils of the 80s, because they had those instruments in their line, I think it just gave the Blue Devils brass a very, very distinctive sound. Anyway, sorry. Now, truth be told, I wasn't a fan of the Gray Devils look. And I didn't really much like the look in '89 as well. I was glad when they went back to blue as their primary color. Although, it is a very classy look. Few all-stars in that line there as well, some that are still big name percussion instructors to this day. Super cool. Typical 1980s Blue Devils percussion feature. Super exposed. Rocking out. Yeah, not much you can say about it, really. Great feature. You know, it's funny when you look at the evolution of the drum corps as well, because you look at this Blue Devils, the visuals, let's be honest, it's really quite pedestrian. The color guard really isn't doing a lot, you know. I don't think that visual demand is there, not when you compare it to a modern Blue Devils show. It's funny how much this particular corps has changed over the years. Such a classy look for that color guard, though. Always love Wayne Downey's arrangements. I especially love how he voices the middle voices. Show. Really nice. Sort of losing my words here. Really nice form control there. I couldn't get the words out. Sorry. '80s Blue Devils were really notorious for using big chunks of the field. And people thought this was the end of the show, and it wasn't, as a matter of fact. Another Blue Devils 80s kind of signature, the show off of the soloists. While the pit guys just put the pit away. And there you go. That is the 1988 Blue Devils. So, some of my thoughts that I would say on that show. It was just like a night at the club almost, you know. It was like just this cool jazz. You could almost picture, you know, if you imbibed back then, having a drink, maybe a little bit of a cigarette, and just chilling out and all that. Of the top three, which you'll see when we move forward, I think it was the least demanding show by a country mile. My big criticism of this particular show would have been on the visual side of things. It just felt very, very pedestrian to me. And another thing as well is that they were the first of the top 5 corps to go on. So I think they came on, was it 6th in the lineup? or 7th in the lineup, something like that. Point being is that they went on well before Vanguard and well before the Madison Scouts. And thinking back in my memory banks to 1988, as I recall, in the stadium, I think that they felt pretty flat. So, anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little bit of a magic video editing cut here. And in the meantime, I'm going to lock in my scores for the Blue Devils. And then the next one that we'll look at is, of course, Santa Clara Vanguard. And that would be Phantom of the Opera version 1. So I'm going to lock my scores in and I'll be right back. Okay, next up we're going to look at is 1988 Santa Clara Vanguard. Now, for the record, the show was different in 1988 than it was in 1989. Musically, visually, they were very similar. They were both Phantom of the Opera, but 1988 was slightly different from a repertoire perspective. So the repertoire in 1988 was Music of the Night, Angel of Music, Phantom of the Opera, Masquerade, Wishing You Were Somehow Here Again, Track Down This Murder, and All I Ask of You. Now, my personal opinion of the two, 88 and 89, Phantom of the Opera shows, I always preferred 1989 simply because I thought 1989, to me, just felt a little bit more aggressive. 1988, for some reason, felt, I don't want to say scared, but almost had like a bit of a nervous energy to it. But anyway, let's go ahead and watch that show, shall we? Right. Do that one there. Oh, wrong button. There we go. That's what we want. And here we go. So 1988, Santa Clara Vanguard, Phantom of the Opera. Straight away, the things that I think you'll notice with this show, sorry, I couldn't get as high of a resolution video of this, is from a visual perspective, this has got a lot more velocity. It's got a lot more going on visually. And I also think that the color guard is far more integrated into this show, whereas in the Blue Devils, I think that the Blue Devils color guard were almost used as background color, if you will. Musically, from a brass perspective as well, I think this is a lot more aggressive than Blue Devils, whereas Blue Devils was really laid back. This is really in your face. And sometimes that in your face goes a little bit over the edge as well. Another thing as well in the color guard with this version of Santa Clara Vanguard is they had boys in the guard, which I think it was the first time they'd ever had boys in the guard, if I'm not mistaken. And they went back to an all-female guard in 1989. Oh no, they had guys in the guard in 86 and 87 as well. I mean, in the first minute and 33 seconds of this show, we've got more visual than in 11 and a half minutes of the Blue Devils. Form control lacking a little bit there on the vertical lines coming down. Again, a little bit of form control issues in the circle on the right side of this particular film here. But again, I'm picking little small tiny things here, but it's also a much more aggressive show. So there's give and take there. Super clean soloists. the featured dancer in the color board, though. He's so good. I love that. I should probably let you guys know I'm actually watching the screen over here. I'm not a professional YouTuber. I should probably be watching that one. One thing they really nailed in this particular show, as far as this particular version of Phantom of the Opera, in my opinion, was the costuming. Absolutely nailed the costuming. Like the low brass part of it. Bump, 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 bump. It's just that driving, menacing rhythm. It's really a counter melody, is it? Oh, hold on to that form over on the right. Or say the same on the circle on the left as well.
Nice rifles. Classic Vanguard move, taking the company front into a straight company front, bringing it down the field. That's a huge visual issue right there, because those two lines are meant to be parallel and take the pass.
Now, DCI cameraman. The magic trick isn't meant to be watched from 5 yards away. Unfortunately, you could actually see the guy moving around under there. Okay, and that is 1988 Santa Clara Vanguard. So pluses and minuses, just as I did with the Blue Devils. I love the aggression of the show. I love the integration of the color guard, much more integrated than the Blue Devils were. The general volume of the core as well. That was a super loud drum core. Negatives, although they're not really negatives when you're at this level, but things that I would say, I think that aggression sometimes led to some sloppy form control, especially notable on the parallel company fronts coming down the field at the end of the show. They weren't even close. And then the other thing as well, nothing to do with the kids, nothing, completely out of their control. I say kids, all these kids are in their 50s now, but completely out of their control. But what I would say, that the thing that I think that 1989 got right over this show was the programming order, because I think with this show here, there was a couple of times where this show probably should have already ended, and we've come down again. So there was a lot of this. Whereas with the Blue Devils, while it was all... Again, I will go back to the Blue Devils and say, this is no disrespect intended, that was by no means the highest demand Blue Devil show ever, okay? But that Blue Devil show stayed at a level, and if anything, that it stayed at a level and grew, whereas the Vanguard show kind of did this. So, again, as I did with the Blue Devils, I'll go ahead and stop the video now, and through the magic of editing, you'll never know that I stopped the video. I'm going to go lock in my scores, and then we're going to finally watch the 1988 Madison Scouts. See you in a minute. So, 1988, Madison Scouts. Here we go. The final three of the trifecta. So, quick, what was their opener called? Nobody knows because nobody remembers. All they can remember out of this show is Malagueña. Malagueña, possibly the 5 greatest minutes of the history of DCI, but there was a beginning part of this show, and therein lies the rub, kind of, because should they have won DCI finals purely on their closer? That's the question. So, other things to think about with the 1988 Madison Scouts, they weren't on the DCI tour for nearly 20 days because it was their 50th anniversary and the Corps traveled to Europe. I'll put a little bit of a there. So let's go ahead, watch the show, and then we'll talk about them. Here we go. This is the highest resolution I could find for the show, by the way. They were marching gods back then as well. Technique for days. Nice use of the field. I like this with the kind of antiphonal question and answer. Super athletic color guard as well. That was a little bit, almost kind of a throwaway moment there. Great dynamics there. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-bow. Should also be noted that their contrabass line is possibly marching with the worst contrabasses ever made, the Deg Super Magnums. They were awful horns with a really weird hand position on them as well. As I recall, I think the valves were like this. It was really weird. Look at those toes. Come on, hold on to that form over on the right. super tight snare line. In fact, I think they might have one percussion, if I recall correctly. That dude looks like he's about 37 with an ex-wife and a mortgage. He was just an older back in the day. Come on, how many of you actually remember the beginning of this show? Comment below. Here we go. Crowd knows what's coming. Again, marching technique gods, every one of them. There is simply no variation from member to member there. When you're looking at visual performance, to me, from a 1988 perspective, visual performance, mind you, I think this is damn near a perfect score. Just, how can you not bop your head to Malaguena? It's almost like the energy just cranked right up. I always got the feeling from the performers that it was almost like they were just kind of muddling through the first part of the show so they could get to this. Go on, cymbals.
One of my favorite percussion features this ever. Needs more cowbell. Cymbals going nod. Contras staged right where they should be, right bang up front center. Modern designers take note. People lost their ever-loving minds at that process. We're using the whole field too, getting everybody in the crowd involved. Should be noted as well, you couldn't hear the chord at this point because the crowd was just going nuts. And there you go. 1988 Madison Scouts. Right, I'll go away, I'll do my sheets, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about my sheets. Here we go. All right. So, 1988 Madison Scouts, my sheets are done. Shall we have a look at them? Let me do this here. In fact, we'll just change screens here. Just give me 1 second here. Right. So my sheets, as I scored them, I've got the general effect. Let's look at general effect. General effect first. I've got Madison Scouts in first place in GE with a 53.2 in total. Second place and third place was a tie at a 52.5. I think from a GE perspective, the Madison Scouts show just absolutely blew away the other two. The power of Malagueña was enough to make me forget about the fact that I forgot about the first 5 or 6 minutes of that show. For those, when I look at Blue Devils and when I look at Vanguard, so when I look at those two cores, and again, this is no disrespect, when I look at those two cores, there's parts of those shows that I'm completely engrossed in. Whereas in the Madison Scouts show, I am completely, hook, line, and sinker for at least the last 6 minutes of that show. But also the first 6 minutes had some really great moments in it as well. And hence the reason why I've got a pretty large gap from a GE perspective. Now, when we get to the performance perspective, though, it's a little bit closer. So, sorry, going back to GE real quick, let's break down the individual captions. So, brass, I gave brass to the Madison Scouts. I gave percussion to Santa Clara Vanguard, and I gave visual to the Madison Scouts. And I just think from a visual perspective, that show was just so much more exciting to watch from the beginning all the way to the end. Now looking at performance. So brass, we went with Blue Devils in first place in brass performance, which I think very few people would have a hard time disagreeing with. That Blue Devils horn line was great, and that show was written to their strengths. Whereas Vanguard and Madison, the shows I think were more challenging, and there was, because of that challenge, sometimes that exposed those lines a bit. Percussion performance, again, Santa Clara Vanguard for this one. Again, I don't think there's really any great deal of surprise there. The surprise might be, though, that I've got Madison above the Blue Devils. And then visual, I said it during the performance, and I'll say it again now. I don't give perfect scores, but if I could, from a visual performance perspective, Madison Scouts would have got a perfect score from me. So 14-9 is my version of a perfect score. 14-5 to the Blue Devils and a 14-2 to Santa Clara. And now that one's a little bit of a misnomer, only because I actually think Santa Clara had a more demanding show, but that demand actually exposed them from a performance perspective. So I think that 14-5 visual performance to the Blue Devils was actually possibly a little bit of a gift there. But that gives us in third place the Santa Clara Vanguard. So I've actually flip-flopped the Santa Clara Vanguard and the Blue Devils with a 95-8. So a tenth of a point between them. But a full... over a full point between them and the Madison Scouts. Again, I think it's just simply the power of Malagueña. Just that show was just exciting from beginning to end. So just for argument's sake, let's see how my scores compare to the actual DCI scores. Give me 1 second here. Right, let's look at screen 2. So here are the actual scores. So again, you had, looking at those three, Vanguard, so DCI judges had Vanguard taking GE ever so slightly over the Madison Scouts, and the Blue Devils in a solid third. On the performance side of things, Madison Scouts running away with it, with both Blue Devils and Santa Clara trailing pretty far behind. So from a score perspective, we were pretty close when comparing it to my scores. So I was a 97-1 down to a 95-8. The actual split was a 97-1 down to a 96-3. So not too far off, really. But let's put it to bed. Should the Madison Scouts have won in 1988? Yes. Yes, they should have. And let's let all the arguments stop now. If, however, you think I'm talking out of my ass, please let me know in the comments section below. Thanks so much for joining us. I know this has been a really long episode. I hope you enjoyed your snacks and your drinks, and we'll see you next time. So, until that time, sorry, I forgot what I was about to do for a second. Until that time, just remember that no matter who you're doing it with, no matter where you're doing it, no matter when you're doing it, or no matter how you're doing it, just when you're doing it, make sure, march on. Ciao.